Good afternoon and welcome to episode 3 of the James Bond Villains documentary. On episode 3 now, we're our movie in question. We're going back to 1973. The James Bond in question was the great Sir Roger Moore, and the movie was called Live and Let Die. As we all know, the classic theme song sang by Paul McCartney and the Wings, and Wings Live and Let Die. The iconic villain was the character Kananga or Mr. Big, and was played by the iconic African actor Yaphet Kotto. Also to feature in this movie were the legendary actors Julius Harris, and still with us today, the iconic Dame Jane Seymour. So our James Bond villain in question for episode 3 is Kananga, Mr. Big, played the character played by the wonderfully talented actor Yaphet Kotto. So Live and Let Die, 1973, Roger Moore as James Bond and Kananga as the main villain.
Joined on the line by Yaphet Kotto to discuss the iconic James Bond series and our special documentary looking at all the iconic main arch villains in the James Bond series. And Yaphet, I was talking to Julian Glover during the week, who played Chris Statos in For Your Eyes Only, and I was talking to Robert Davi, who played Franz Sanchez in the film A License to Kill, and I asked him the same question I'm going to ask you, Yaphet. How did the opportunity come arise for you to be cast as the main James Bond villain in the film Live and Let Die in 1973?
Did you see the article I wrote about Roger in Facebook?
I haven't, no, yet. I haven't. I've been trying to get contacts for all the Bond films, so I haven't got around to that. I must do.
Taking a look at it, right? Take a look at it. To get to your question, I was doing across 110th Street in New York City with Anthony Quinn.
Right.
And we were working very hard. And an executive from United Artists walked up to me on the street, and he said, "Yaphet, my name is Arnold Picker.
Right.
I'm from United Artists." He says, "I hope I'm not disturbing you." I said, "No, I'm doing your movie." He said, "I know." He said, "But I have another movie for you to do. We have another movie. We like you, and when you get through with this, with Anthony," he says, "we want you to star with Roger in Live and Let Die."
Right.
So I was literally on my lunch break with Quinn across 110th Street in Harlem.
Yeah.
When Mr. Picker from the United Artists told me what they wanted me to do, and I took the part right there. I was very happy about it. It's not often you get cast for a movie while you're doing another movie.
Yeah.
I'm coming out there and clean you up, and I mean that.
Yeah, and Yaphet, had
Is this
you
the
known
stupid
much
mother that
about
tailed you up,
the
pal?
James Bond franchise?
Seems to
Were
be
you a
some
fan of
mistake.
it before you got
My
the
name is
opportunity to
Tombstones,
take
baby.
part in Live and
Y'all
Let
take
Die?
this
Had
honky
you
out and
seen
waste
the
it now.
Dr. No with Sean Connery? When you got the role, did you research a good lot into the past, the relationship between Bonds and his arch villains, and what sort of twist or take did you want to put on the Dr. Kananga and Mr. Big character when you saw that original script?
Well, when I got the part, I told my father about it. My father's from the Cameroons in Africa, and he had seen Dr. No in Africa.
Right.
So when I called him, he was in Douala at the time. When I called him in Douala and told him what was going on, all the Cameroonians were very excited. And they started asking me, did I want to get it? Was I playing Baron Samanese? I said, no, I'm playing Kananga, Dr. Kananga. And it was very exciting. So the Cameroonians knew about it long before anybody else. And I didn't have much to draw on because while Kananga believes in voodoo, so did members of my family, even now, still practice the form of voodoo. So we were talking about voodoo a lot before I played the role, and my advice came from real practitioners voodoo in Douala.
Yeah, and you mentioned there about the occult and being able to the feeling like he can control and past and present and the future, and that was very important to the Dr. Kananga. This idea that he can be able to see what the future lies in hold for him. And do you think that was just because the Kananga's character, he was rooted in his society and his beliefs and the fear of the voodoo cult, and in relation to that, that maybe sort of was a sort of weakness in his character, that maybe he relied too much on being able to see what was in store for him.
Distributor and wholesaler through a chain of Philly-o-Soul restaurants.
I didn't see it that way because when I was about 10 years old.
Sell heroin.
My mother took me to...
My apologies, I'm sure you simply give it away.
Voodoo woman.
Excellent, Mr. Big. That's precisely what I intend to do.
She was from Panama.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what... I'm 10 years old, okay?
Yeah.
So the woman does some things, puts them on my head, and then she says to my mother, first an actor, and then a priest.
Yeah.
Like that, and I didn't know what the hell she was talking about, and she gave me a red bag, and she said, keep it on your body because you will have 3 enemies who are actors. Yeah. Always keep this will be a protection from you. So when you grow up with things like that, and I read the script, it wasn't a matter of do I believe it, and I was into it. I really believe. And to this day, I still believe that there are people with supernatural powers that can make things happen or ward off evil intentions of people who would like to do you harm.
Yeah, and Yaphet, this Bond film, it went away from the sort of super arch villain, the Goldfinger, the Dr. No, this take over the whole world aspect. It went back to a more sort of dictator sort of a role where Mr. Big was controlling the Harlem, he was controlling the drug scene there, and then Kananga was a corrupt Caribbean dictator who sort of were the heroin poppy. So it was more of a sort of tying in with the times in relation to Harlem, in relation to the drug problem that was in the States at the time. It was tying into more real life scenarios. It got away from the superficial take over the world, launch rockets into space sort of thing like Moonraker was about. This was a James Bond film that was very much deep rooted into what was going on in roughly at that time in the States and in the Caribbean.
So what do you want me to say? What are you asking me?
So I'm just asking you, in your take in it, do you think in relation to this James Bond movie, where the franchise moved in a different direction to previous Bonds, and was...
it did. It did. It did move in a different direction because there's a reality there that the author caught in terms of certain ethnic people believing in voodoo. And magic, black magic. It's always been a part of our third world people. It's still a part of it. It's a part of me. You can't get it out of your system.
Yes.
So the movie, when the script writer wrote that, he brought that in because it's a part of a reality of certain people in this world. It's part of their reality. It was part of my mother was a doctor. She was an officer in the United States Army. She was a highly educated woman, but she still took me to a voodoo woman. So it doesn't, education and stuff doesn't move away from certain practices and things that you learn from your race. So when the author was creating this character, he had to move in that direction. He couldn't just do this movie as if the character was Goldfinger. Goldfinger doesn't have such policies in his life. But Dr. Kananga would have a policy like that. Even the character I played, Idi Amin, believed in doing certain practices that protect him from his enemies. So that's a part of third world experience, I believe.
Yeah, and I was just reading when doing some research, and Tom Mankiewicz, the screenwriter for the actual movie, when searching for locations to shoot in Jamaica, the crew discovered a crocodile farm owned by Ross Kananga, and after passing a sign warning that says trespassers will be eaten, the farm was put into script and inspired Mankiewicz to name your arch-villain the name Kananga. Was sort of came from about. So if you can talk to me about maybe the locations and for shooting for the James Bond, that movie, did it take maybe 4 or 5 months to film in all the different locations, and were you mainly set there in Louisiana and out in Jamaica?
Well, I had a very great experience. Cubby Broccoli, the producer of that movie, he took me to a lot of locations that we went to South America. We went different places. We ended up doing it in Jamaica. We ended up going to England. We just went to different parts, Harlem, New York City. We went to different areas looking for the proper locations, and we ended up with Jamaica, England, and New York. So it was the locations had to be in the West Indies. That's what in the Caribbean. It had, because that's where the story, the heart of the story is, and it had to be there. And so he didn't go to Brazil. He couldn't go anywhere else. He had to focus in on Ocho Rios in Jamaica.
And I suppose the Live and Let Die is arguably renowned as one of the iconic James Bond villains in James Bond movies, and much success goes to your arch-villain character, but you had very, very powerful, notorious henchmen there in relation to Julius Harris, who played T.T. Johnson, a one-man armed henchman with a prosthetic hand, and the voodoo priest Baron Samedi. So it almost felt like that there was an entire you had this entire network of arch-villain henchmen around you, and it really was a sort of gripping encounter where Bond was constantly, Roger Moore was constantly up against it the whole time, and there's some iconic moments and scenes and versions. I mean, Drown Mr. Bond, I doubt you get the chance to drown, and Names is in relation to when Bond meets Mr. Big for the first time. Names is for Tombstone's baby. You take this hunky out and waste him. And when you see scenes and actions like that, are there an awful lot of fun to play on set?
I'll let that what? I get the last part you asked. I'll let not what?
Yeah, are they an awful lot? Are scenes and action scenes like that, the interactions, are there an awful lot of? Are they rewarding for an actor to play on set? Those iconic moments, those face-to-face interactions.
Well, I don't know what you're really getting at, but all I can tell you is that Roger and I wrote this story about Roger on Facebook, on my Facebook page, Yaphet Kotto Facebook page.
Yeah.
Roger and I got along just well. He was like a brother to me, and the scenes that we played together was more like a fencing match. Each time that we met, we fenced with each other. But there was a mutual understanding of I think of like and dislike with the two characters with Kananga and Bond. There was that tension but not tension, anger but not anger, kind of gentleman, the same kind of relationship that Sherlock Holmes had with Dr. What's his name now?
Moriarty.
With Moriarty, with Holmes and Moriarty, there's a kind of a mutual respect for each other's power and intelligence that Roger and I were using, and to me it worked. I didn't want to play Kananga as an arch evil, crazy guy because the damn thing was close to, it was bordering on comic book with the rest of the characters. So the one reality was Kananga relationship with Roger. As long as the reality of that was working, the other characters, which were Big, large dimensional character bordering on almost on cartoon. Those characters faded away, and the relationship between Bond and Kananga struggle over this woman was fine. That worked out pretty good.
Yeah, and Yaphet, in relation to the stunts team and the production team that you had in Live and Let Die, I imagine it was top class. I mean, 26 boats were built for the boat chase in Louisiana, where 17 were destroyed during our rehearsals, and then there was those scenes in those alligator farm and those snake scenes, and for actors at that time, it was so sort of. Even the scene where you're underwater with James Bond, did you have to learn how to swim, or that sort of shark scene as well, where they were so iconic for that time and period? It was really a set that where the scenes were well done.
Roger and I had to take a dump into the lake, into a pool.
Yeah,
that was real. So that was us swimming in the water. We had to fight and fall in the water and go underwater, where he shoved the capsule in Kananga's mouth, and then escapes to the. I'm an excellent swimmer, so that didn't bother me too much at all. We did it in the studio, and then we came out to California and we did it in the big giant shark tank out there,
right.
and it worked. So yeah, I did have to do my paddle around a little bit, and that was it was a good ending. But yes, we both are good swimmers, and we both went underwater and we did those scenes with the camera crew, and it worked.
Yeah, and I suppose this James Bond film, it was a first in many ways. We Gloria Hendry, who played Rosie Carver, was the first African American Bond girl to be romantically linked with James Bond, and even those network of spies and taxis and honkies and the pimp mobiles, and even the sort of boat chases were dramatic for its time as well. And do you feel that Live and Let Die rightly stands alone in the top 10 of James Bond?
Live and Let Die stands alone because it was the first time in movie history, in film history, wherein a bad guy was black and out to get James Bond. It was never done in any other movie. Not dramatic, not semi-dramatic, not comedic. It was number one in terms of being a first. The other first that I had done was a film called The Liberation of Lord Byron Jones, where I threw a white man into a threshing machine and he was killed. That was a first. They'd never seen a white man killed by a black actor on screen before.
Wow.
So they had never seen a black actor as a villain, not only just a villain, but a well-tailored, well-mannered, well-spoken villain after James Bond. Those films made it history, made it a classic in terms of African Americans. I mean, African Americans, when James Bond opened up his theaters around the country, they tell me that it sounded like the inside of a baseball park when I walked onto the screen, and people were screaming and carrying on. They'd never seen a hero like that before. And so that distinction goes down in my record, my history of having made history, as I did in Alien. We had never seen a black man out in space before. So those three pictures, Alien, The Liberation of Lord Byron Jones, and Live and Let Die, were three movies that opened up the entire industry to African character actors, leading men, and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and Yaphet, in your own words, how would you say in 3 sentences, how would you describe Mr. Kananga or Big Mr. Big character? What was his strengths, and even then what was the sort of weakness that he had?
I see him as the black Moriarty. That's what I see him. His strength was his panache.
Yes, Kananga.
He always did have an inflated opinion of himself.
His style, his women, and his weakness was his women, of course. But his breaking point, his Achilles heel, so to speak, was his undying belief that is voodoo. That's what's got him. Had he been a little bit more practical, I think he would have gotten Bond, but he was too caught up in, as I am. I don't do anything unless I pray to my gods and do my meditation and remember all the things that my African family taught me in terms of protecting myself through spiritual power. So that part of me is still there. And it's done me, to this day, I know who my enemies are in Hollywood. I know who my enemies are in real life. And I feel that if they should make a move on me, I would have to resort to certain spiritual practices to fend them off.
Yeah, and Yaphet, the film holds the record for the most viewed broadcast film on television in the UK by attracting 23.5 million viewers when premiered on ITV on the 20th of January 1980. So that was when it premiered in the UK in 20th of January 1980 on ITV. 23.5 million viewers viewed the film. And I suppose, Yaphet, in relation to that, when you look back about all the James Bond films, right down from the Dr. No, how sort of proud and privileged are you to be in that sort of elite sort of cast of actors? There might be only 10 or 12 or 13 James Bond villains so far, and that you will always forever be in that sort of list with all those names. And it's an elite class, and it must be something you're very proud of.
I tell you what, man, I did a movie in Spain with Ava Gardner some time ago called Harem. It is a pleasure when you go to other countries and you walk into down the street and people come out from everywhere and start chanting a Kananga, or they walk into a restaurant and they start playing Live and Let Die. It's a very moving thing to find yourself being known throughout the entire world, because Bond is one of the the whole world is seeing Bond. Yeah. Everyone has seen that Bond. I came to France, Germany, everywhere I go to this day, they will play that music at certain restaurant. They'll start playing Live and Let Die. So it's something that stayed with you. It made me internationally famous. It really did. Like no other film. Alien, of course, also was a big film for me and was maybe internationally famous. But Live and Let Die put me on the mouth, put my name on the lips of every single person throughout the entire world. And you can't buy that kind of notoriety. You can't buy it. It either comes or it doesn't come. And for me, God sent it to me, and I thank God for all the executives at United Artists who stood behind me on that movie and who cast me in that film.
And finally, before I let you go, Yaphet Kotto, if I could put maybe Mr. Big, Dr. Kananga in a sort of sentence in a dictionary, and I ask you, Yaphet, how would you like to be remembered in a decade so, or even now to this day, for your role as Dr. Kananga in the James Bond Live and Let Die? If you put two sentences underneath that in a dictionary, what would you like them to read?
That's hard to say. I think I'm a legend. That's it. Kotto is a legend, a movie legend.
Yaphet Kotto, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today in relation to our documentary on the James Bond arch-villain series. You stand the test of time as one of the elite James Bond villains. You revolutionised the franchise when Live and Let Die came out in 1973. It's been an honour being able to follow your career since then, and we wish you all the best in your future endeavours. Thank you, Yaphet.
That concludes episode 3 of the James Bond villain documentaries. Do join us for episode 4. The movie, James Bond movie in question, is the 1981 classic For Your Eyes Only, featuring the one and only Sir Roger Moore. And the villain this time is played by the one and only talented British actor Julian Glover, who plays the main villain Christatos. So that is our next episode of the James Bond villain documentaries, featuring the 1981 James Bond movie For Your Eyes Only. The main villain is Christatos, played by the one and only Julian Glover, and the main James Bond in this movie is the great Sir Roger Moore. See you for episode 4. folks, that concludes episode 3 of the James Bond villain documentaries. Do join us for episode 4. The movie, James Bond movie in question is the 1981 classic For Your Eyes Only, featuring again the one and only Sir Roger Moore. And the villain this time is played by the one and only talented British actor Julian Glover, who plays the main villain Christatos. So that is our next episode of the James Bond villain documentaries, featuring the 1981 James Bond movie For Your Eyes Only. The main villain is Christatos, played by the one and only